The history of Iran is always a history of radical pivots. The Greeks defended their independence. But for the giant Achaemenid Empire, losing a couple of fringe cities was like a mosquito bite. The Persians simply changed tactics. They began funding first Athens, then Sparta, pitting the Greeks against each other. Ultimately, in 387 before Christ, the exhausted Greeks were forced to sign a humiliating treaty on the terms of the Persian king Artaxerxes. What the Persians could not take with a massive army, they bought. Persia became the undisputed master of Greece without firing a single shot. The real catastrophe came later. The Achaemenid Empire grew to such massive proportions that a weak central government could no longer control dozens of different nations. A young, ambitious king from Macedonia took advantage of this, Alexander. In 330 before Christ, Macedonian phalanxes ruthlessly crushed the Persian army. Alexander burned the magnificent Persepolis. It seemed the 1,000-year history of Iran was finished. From the ruins of the Achaemenids arose the Hellenistic Seleucid state ruled by Greeks. And that is exactly when the Iranian survival mechanism kicked in. Eastern culture began to methodically devour its Western conquerors. Alexander himself started wearing Persian clothes and adopted Persian court etiquette. The policy of Hellenization choked on the thick ancient Iranian worldview. In the 3rd century before Christ, the Parthians, an Indo-Iranian tribe, kicked the Greeks out and created the Parthian Empire. The Parthian ruler Mithridates I proclaimed himself King of Kings and the successor to the Achaemenids. For 5 centuries, the Parthians, relying on highly mobile cavalry and the famous Parthian shot, successfully stood their ground against the Roman Empire itself, dealing crushing defeats to the legions in the Middle East. Then, in the year 224, a new golden age arrived. The Sassanid dynasty took power, hailing from the Pars region, the homeland of the first Persians. They created a fiercely centralized state where Zoroastrianism became the official state doctrine. Society was divided into strict castes: priests, warriors, bureaucrats, and commoners, establishing an ideal meritocracy. Sassanid Iran was a superpower that waged grueling wars for almost 400 years, first with Rome and then with Byzantium for control over Mesopotamia and the Caucasus. But these centuries of endless warfare bled Iran dry. By the mid-7th century, the Sassanid Empire was a bleeding giant, a new, unprecedented force emerging from the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula capitalized on this, the Arab Caliphate. In 651, the Persian capital fell, and the last Shah of the Sassanid dynasty was treacherously murdered. All of Iran fell under Arab rule. The era of the Umayyad Caliphate began. The Arabs brought a new religion, Islam, and a new language. Zoroastrianism, which had fueled the Iranian spirit for millennia, began to fade. For any other culture, this would have meant the total erasure of identity, just as it happened with Egypt or Syria, which became permanently Arabized. But the Persians did it again. Various Arab rulers tried to force the Persians to abandon their roots completely. Yet, having suffered military defeat, the Iranians struck back culturally. The Islamic Caliphate, especially under the Abbasids, began to rely heavily on Persian bureaucrats, scholars, and poets. Arab caliphs adopted Persian methods of governance. The Farsi language did not just survive, it outlived dozens of empires, and the greatest scientific treatises and poems continued to be written in it. After the Arabs, a true apocalypse crashed down upon Iran. In the year 1220, Genghis Khan arrived from the steppes of Central Asia. The Mongols did not just conquer territories, they slaughtered entire cities and wiped thousand-year-old irrigation systems off the face of the earth. It seemed Iran would turn into a pasture for nomads. But when the grandson of Genghis Khan, Hulagu, founded a Mongol state here called the Ilkhanate, something incredible happened. The harsh conquerors, used to living in yurts, suddenly embraced Islam. They made the Persian language the language of the state. They began building grandiose Persian mosques with blue domes, funding local scholars and poets. At the end of the 14th century, history repeated itself. Tamerlane stormed into these lands. He erected pyramids out of severed human heads, yet at the same time he stood in awe of Persian culture. He took the best Iranian artisans back to his capital, and his descendants, the Timurids, sparked a true Persian Renaissance, turning their courts into centers of exquisite miniatures and poetry. For almost 300 years, Iran was a boiling cauldron where political power belonged to fearsome Mongols and Turks. But upon taking the Iranian throne, within a couple of generations, they irrevocably became Persians. The Iranian cultural code completely reprogrammed its invaders. And then, out of this 300-year cauldron of tribes and dynasties, a man named Shah Ismail emerged in 1501. He reunited the country and founded the Safavid state. It was the Safavids who made Shia Islam the state religion of Iran, forever separating it culturally and politically from the rest of the predominantly Sunni Islamic world and the Ottoman Empire. Iran once again forged its rigid, unique identity. By the 19th century, under the Turkic Qajar dynasty, Iran entered a period of severe crisis. Following devastating wars with the Russian Empire, the country permanently lost the territories of modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. By the early 20th century, on the eve of the First World War, Iran had become a backdrop for the Great Game, the geopolitical standoff between the British and Russian empires. The country was effectively carved into spheres of influence. The British pumped Iranian oil, while Russian troops stood in the north. Later, the Soviet Union even tried to create a communist republic in northern Iran. The country was suffocating under the weight of colonial powers. But Iran would not be Iran if it didn't find a way out. In 1925, Reza Shah Pahlavi came to power as the result of a military coup. He charted a hardline course toward industrialization and modernization. And in 1935, he made a move that shook global diplomacy. For centuries, the entire Western world had called this country Persia. This word, derived from the Greek name for the Pars region, was associated in Europe with fairy tales, carpets, backwardness, and exoticism. Reza Shah declared, "Enough." He sent an official directive to all embassies. From now on, the country must be called by its true ancient name, the very one they had called themselves for millennia: Iran, the land of the Aryans. This was not just a linguistic whim, it was a statement. We are not an exotic colony. We are a modern, powerful nation with ancient roots, and you will reckon with us. The history of Iran is always a history of radical pivots. In the 20th century, the country found itself on the global chessboard, caught between the interests of superpowers. Decades of political turbulence and foreign interference ultimately led to the country exploding in the Islamic Revolution of 1979. The monarchy fell. Iran became a theocratic republic, and relations with the West were severed. And today, we witness a stunning historical paradox. In the mind of modern man, two completely different states exist simultaneously. The word Iran triggers in most people images of geopolitical tension, harsh sanctions, conflicts, and grim news reports. Meanwhile, the word Persia, ironically, has not disappeared at all. It has acquired a romantic, almost mythical aura. Persia is associated with lost grandeur, refined poetry, flying carpets, and fairy tale empires. 2 names, 1 land, and a constant, relentless struggle over exactly how it will be remembered. Over its 5,000-year history, this culture developed the ultimate mechanism for survival. When clashing with Macedonians, Arabs, or Mongols, they did not disappear. They absorbed their conquerors, reshaping them to fit their own mold. They stood at the origins of civilization and invented the time in which we live. But perhaps their greatest battle is taking place right now.